The ballroom lights gleamed off glass walls and polished marble floors. Cameras clicked like a chorus of whispers as the world's most powerful tech leaders gathered under one roof. The Global Tech Forum, a summit where billion-dollar futures were decided over a handshake. Maya Carter extended her hand. Across from her stood Richard Langford, CEO of Langford Systems, a man whose arrogance filled the space before his words ever did. He looked at her hand, smiled faintly, and said, "I don't shake hands with diversity hires." Then he slapped her hand away. Gasps erupted. The cameras flashed harder, almost hungry for the scandal. A few nearby executives shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Silence spread like a crack across glass. Richard reached for the folder in Maya's hand, the official merger proposal between his company and Novatech Dynamics, the fastest-growing quantum research firm in North America. He tore the pages in half, one slow rip at a time, letting the fragments fall to the floor. Then he stepped on them, grinding them beneath his shoe. "These deals require experience," he sneered. "Not quotas." Maya didn't move. Her face was composed, but her eyes burned with restrained fire. Richard leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "Your board made a mistake," he whispered. "But don't worry. I'll fix it after the merger." He smirked, confident that this public humiliation would go unchallenged. After all, in his world, men like him always walked away untouched. Then Maya straightened her jacket, checked her watch, and whispered two words that shifted the entire room. Merger canceled. The story didn't begin there. It began that same morning, long before the cameras, before the insult, before the headlines that would shake an entire industry. Maya arrived at the summit before dawn, her steps quiet but deliberate. Her car door opened to the crisp winter air of Toronto's financial district. The sun hadn't risen yet, but her company's future already hung in the balance. She wasn't just any CEO. She was the mind behind quantum neural mapping, a discovery revolutionizing medical research worldwide. Under her leadership, Novatech became a symbol of innovation, led by intellect, not image. The proposed merger with Langford Systems was valued at nearly $8 billion. Together, they would dominate the next generation of computing. But she already knew that power attracts predators. Inside the VIP lounge, the hum of expensive conversation filled the air. Men in tailored suits laughed in tight circles. Investors compared yachts while assistants adjusted name tags. Maya stood out, calm, poised, deliberate, her navy suit a quiet declaration of strength. From across the room, Richard watched her. "Who let the help into the executive section?" He muttered to his CFO. Nervous laughter followed. No one corrected him. Maya heard every word. She said nothing, but her mind recorded it. Every smirk, every condescending glance. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. Keynote at 9:30, panel at 2. She looked up just as Richard's reflection appeared in the mirrored wall, smiling like a man rehearsed in charm. By the time the keynote began, Maya was seated 2 rows from the front. The moderator read from the program. "And joining us from Novatech Dynamics," Richard interrupted, waving casually toward her seat. "From HR, I assume?" The room tensed. The moderator cleared his throat. "Actually, that's Maya Carter, CEO of Novatech Dynamics." A ripple of awkward silence followed. Richard shrugged. "Easy mistake." The smirk didn't leave his face. The audience laughed softly, unsure whether to align with power or conscience. Maya smiled back, faint but deliberate. That same smile had unnerved prosecutors when she'd once stood in court, back when she was still Assistant District Attorney Maya Carter, long before the tech world ever learned her name. She had left that world behind, or so she thought. Later that afternoon, during pre-merger meetings, Richard performed his usual theater. Every time Maya spoke, he interrupted. Every time she explained a technical point, he redirected the question to one of her male engineers. "Let's hear from someone with engineering background," he said, cutting her mid-sentence. Her hand tightened on her tablet. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was calculation. By lunch, she sat alone at a corner table, reading the merger clauses one more time. The language was precise, the conditions deliberate. She'd drafted parts of it herself. A table away, Richard was holding court with investors. His voice carried over the clinking of silverware. "The merger is just regulatory theater," he said loudly. "Once it's done, we'll restructure their leadership. Put someone qualified in charge." Laughter followed. The sound turned a few heads. Phones recorded discreetly from other tables. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Ethan Liu, her chief legal officer. "Still want to proceed?" Her response came quick. "Let's see how far he goes." The afternoon panel was her moment. Maya took the stage to present Novatech's latest breakthrough, neural quantum integration, a system that allowed biological memory to interact with quantum algorithms. The crowd was captivated. For a moment, science silenced prejudice. Then Richard interrupted. "What Maya means is—" He repeated it again and again, hijacking her own explanation. The third time he did it, she simply turned toward him and smiled. That calm, unflinching smile, the kind that unsettles men who mistake silence for surrender. The journalists in the front row exchanged glances. Their recorders were already running. What Richard didn't realize was that the more he spoke, the more evidence Maya gathered. And when he laughed that final time, thinking he'd humiliated her, he'd already handed her the key to his downfall. That night, the pre-announcement reception sparkled with chandeliers and champagne. Billionaires and policymakers mingled like kings. Maya entered with grace, no entourage, no theatrics, only quiet focus. Her team spread through the room, each one wearing discreet recording devices synced to her encrypted network. Richard approached, 3 board members in tow. "Maya," he said warmly, the same warmth one might use before a knife slips between ribs. "Just the person I wanted to see." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We're revising the announcement speech. You'll have 2 minutes instead of 5. "The technical specifics need context," she replied calmly. "Technical details bore people like this." He waved dismissively. "Let's keep it simple." Maya's voice didn't rise. "The technical details are why this merger matters." He leaned closer. "Let's be honest, Maya. Your company's valuation is inflated. We're doing you a favor." A few investors overheard. One frowned but said nothing. "Our valuation reflects our patents and research," Maya said evenly. "Perhaps you should review them again." Richard chuckled. "I've seen enough science projects from your team. What matters is who can execute. That's why we're here." She took a half step back. "Don't touch me, Richard." "Touchy," he smirked. "Is that how you got the board to appoint you?" The air froze. No one spoke. No one intervened. Complicity was the language of powerful rooms. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Found what you suspected. Call when ready." She didn't reply. Not yet, because the night wasn't over, and neither was he. But by morning, one of them would no longer be standing on that summit stage. The next morning arrived with the hum of anticipation. Every major media outlet had set up cameras around the stage, lights blazing against the silver backdrop of the Grand Horizon Hotel ballroom. Journalists whispered predictions about the historic merger between Novatech and Langford Systems. Billionaires filled the front rows, their faces expectant and watchful. Richard Langford took the stage first, his confidence oozing through every practiced smile. His dark suit shimmered under the spotlights, his posture that of a man convinced the world was his stage. He tapped the microphone twice. "Today marks a turning point for our industry," he began. "Together, we'll redefine the future of technology." His voice rolled across the room, smooth and loud. The slides behind him glowed with Langford Systems' logo, dominating the screen, dwarfing the smaller Novatech emblem tucked into the corner. Maya sat in the front row, her expression unreadable. Every word he spoke carved away at her company's contributions, reframing years of her team's work as mere footnotes in his empire. "And now," he said with an exaggerated flourish, "allow me to introduce the woman who helped bring this deal together, Maya Carter." Applause rose politely. Maya stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked to the podium. She reached for her notes, but Richard's elbow accidentally knocked over his glass. Water spilled across her documents. He smiled for the cameras. "Oops, my mistake." The laughter was soft but sharp, the kind that bruises pride. Maya looked down at the ruined papers, then left them on the table. "Good thing I memorized it," she said calmly. She began to speak, her voice measured but strong. "Novatech's quantum architecture isn't just a technological milestone. It's proof that innovation comes from collaboration, not hierarchy." The audience leaned in. The authority in her voice commanded respect. For a moment, the room felt hers. Then Richard cut in again. "What Maya means is that our combined resources will make this innovation truly viable." She ignored him and continued. Our system enables medical research that can decode complex diseases in hours instead of years. Her words flowed with precision and purpose. The crowd responded with genuine interest. Cameras focused on her now, not him. Richard's smile tightened. He laughed loudly, stepping to her side. "That's adorable," he said into his microphone. "Let me explain what's actually happening here." He moved in front of her, taking over the presentation entirely. His arrogance filled the room like smoke. Maya stepped back, allowing him to speak. She didn't interrupt. She didn't correct him when he misrepresented her research or when he called quantum states fancy binary systems. She simply stood there, calm, composed, silent. A journalist raised her hand. "Ms. Carter, would you like to clarify Mr. Langford's interpretation?" Before she could open her mouth, Richard interjected again. "We've taken enough of Ms. Carter's time," he said smoothly. "She has diversity panels to attend, I'm sure." The air left the room. Shock rippled through the audience. A few people gasped audibly. Maya didn't react. Not even a flinch. She turned from the podium and walked off the stage with quiet dignity. The cameras followed her every step. Richard believed he'd crushed her. What he didn't realize was that every word he'd spoken had been recorded, and every insult had already been transmitted to secure servers miles away. In the shadows near the back of the room, Ethan, her legal officer, met her eyes and gave a small nod. The evidence was complete. While Richard entertained questions from reporters, Maya made 3 short phone calls. Her voice never rose. Her instructions were simple, direct, and final. By the time she returned to her private conference suite, her legal team was already assembled. The room sealed automatically when she entered, glass walls turning opaque, digital locks sliding into place. Ethan sat straight-backed beside her. "We're ready," he said. Her head of communications leaned forward, concern flickering in her eyes. "If we pull the plug, there's no turning back. Our stock might take a hit." Maya placed her tablet on the table. "This isn't about stock prices. It's about integrity." The third person in the room, voice distorted through a digital filter, spoke from the screen. "The financial irregularities in Langford's last funding round are confirmed." "You were right. His numbers are fabricated." Maya's expression didn't change. "Then the path is clear." Outside, the post-announcement reception buzzed with forced optimism. Richard basked in the spotlight, surrounded by his board members and investors. Champagne glasses clinked. He laughed too loudly. "Once we finalize the paperwork," he told his inner circle, "we'll absorb their patents, restructure the division, and replace their leadership. She'll be gone within 6 months." His general counsel hesitated. "Sir, there's a clause in the merger agreement. Section 14(3). It grants either party the right to terminate under misconduct conditions." Richard waved him off. "Boilerplate nonsense. Nobody enforces those." "It's specific," the lawyer said quietly. "It defines misconduct as discriminatory or unethical behavior by senior leadership. Liquidated damages are 30% of the merger's total value." Richard froze, his champagne glass halfway to his lips. "That's over $2 billion. "Yes," the lawyer replied, "and Ms. Carter's team has recorded everything." The color drained from his face. Across the room, Maya stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the skyline. She took a slow breath, her reflection meeting his from across the crowd. He looked away first. Her phone vibrated again. A new message from her anonymous contact.
"The SEC is ready to receive your file."
"When you give the word, it's in motion." She typed one word back. "Proceed." Within minutes, encrypted data packets began transferring to federal servers. Evidence of embezzlement, falsified valuations, insider trading, all traced back to Langford Systems. While the music played and investors smiled, an empire quietly began to crumble. By midnight, Maya had signed the official termination notice. The document was short, direct, and devastating. It cited Section 14.3 of the merger agreement and attached a 50-page addendum of documented evidence. The timestamp read 11:59 p.m. The next morning, the news broke like thunder. Novatech cancels $7.8 billion merger citing misconduct, the headlines read. Langford Systems under federal investigation. TV anchors repeated the story across every major network. Stock tickers flashed red. Richard Langford's name trended worldwide, for all the wrong reasons. He stormed into Maya's office without knocking, his face flushed with fury. You can't terminate this deal, he shouted. Your board approved it. Maya remained seated, calm as ever. Read the agreement you signed, Richard. He slammed his hand on her desk. You're throwing away billions over hurt feelings. No, she said evenly. I'm enforcing consequences. You're making a career-ending mistake, he growled. Not for me, she replied. At that moment, Richard's phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications lit up the screen, breaking news alerts, stock updates, media calls. His stock had plummeted 8% in an hour. Novatex remained steady. This is market manipulation, he shouted. Maya looked at him, her tone still calm. No, it's the market responding to leadership failure. He glared at her, teeth clenched. I'll destroy you in the press. Try it, she said. Every outlet already has footage of your behavior. He stared at her for several long seconds, his anger collapsing under the weight of reality. Then he turned and stormed out, shouting orders into his phone that no one seemed eager to follow. Maya closed her laptop. The screen reflected the faintest hint of a smile, because this wasn't revenge. It was correction, and it was only beginning. By dawn, the entire tech world was on fire. News anchors repeated the story in urgent voices, while social media turned Richard Langford's name into a symbol of arrogance and downfall. Clips from the summit circulated everywhere. The handshake refusal, the dismissive comments, the smug grin when he spilled water on Maya's notes. Millions watched, shared, and condemned. In her suite, Maya sat with her team watching the coverage in silence. The headlines flashed in quick succession. Novatex CEO cancels historic merger over discrimination. Langford Systems faces SEC inquiry. Every outlet had picked up the story. Every opinion had already formed, and every camera lens now pointed not at Richard, but at her. Her communications director broke the silence. We can issue a formal statement before the markets open. What do you want it to say? Maya looked out the window at the skyline. Tell the truth, she said. That we exercised our right to terminate under the misconduct clause, and that Novatech remains committed to ethical technology. That's it? The director asked. That's enough, she replied. The facts will do the talking. While Novatech's official message spread with calm precision, Richard's team scrambled in panic. In a hastily arranged press conference in the hotel lobby, Richard stood before flashing cameras, trying to piece together his shattered image. Maya Carter acted impulsively, he declared, his tone carefully measured. Her decision was emotional and unprofessional. This merger would have benefited both companies, but she chose personal offense over business sense. Reporters shouted questions over each other. One voice rose above the noise. Mr. Langford, videos from the summit show you knocking over her presentation materials and making discriminatory remarks. Do you deny that? His jaw tightened. Those clips are out of context, he said quickly. You people love a scandal. I have the utmost respect for diversity and inclusion. But his forced composure cracked when another journalist called out, Is it true the SEC has requested your financial records? He froze for a fraction of a second too long. Cameras captured every flicker of panic. That pause became the headline. Across town, Maya arrived at Novatech's headquarters to a standing ovation from her staff. They had watched everything unfold. Their leader had taken on one of the industry's most powerful men and walked away stronger. She didn't make a speech. She simply raised a hand, motioning for quiet. We're not celebrating his failure, she said softly. We're affirming our standards. In the boardroom upstairs, her legal and executive teams gathered around a glowing digital display filled with reports, recordings, and financial data. Ethan summarized the latest findings. We've confirmed that Langford Systems inflated their Series E valuation by at least 20%. Their CFO has already contacted investigators. Her finance officer whistled quietly. That's corporate fraud. He's in serious trouble. Maya nodded. And this time there's proof. Her general counsel spoke up. The penalty clause alone will force them to pay us over $2 billion. They're trying to negotiate it down, but I recommend we hold firm. Maya's answer was immediate. We don't negotiate harassment penalties. We hold the line. Outside that room, Richard's empire was unraveling faster than anyone predicted. His investors demanded explanations. Major clients paused contracts. His own board began scheduling an emergency meeting without his knowledge. In a luxury penthouse overlooking the same skyline, Richard sat surrounded by screens. Each one displayed bad news: falling stocks, legal notices, leaked emails. His public relations team pleaded with him to apologize, to show humility, to at least acknowledge wrongdoing. "I don't apologize for things I didn't do," he snapped. "She's manipulating the narrative. We counter it." One of his advisors hesitated. "Sir, the evidence—" He slammed his fist on the table. "We control perception. That's what leadership is." But leadership was slipping through his fingers. Even his most loyal executives were beginning to distance themselves. His head of communications quietly handed in her resignation before leaving the building without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, whistleblowers from within Langford Systems began reaching out to Novatech's legal department. They sent emails, audio recordings, and written statements describing years of discrimination, intimidation, and financial misconduct. One message ended simply: "We stayed silent too long. Thank you for not doing the same." Maya read each submission personally. She didn't gloat, didn't celebrate. She just filed them neatly into the growing case folder. Facts, not fury, would finish this. As night fell, Richard's own lawyer arrived at his penthouse carrying a briefcase that seemed heavier than usual. "You need to hear this directly," he said. "The SEC is expanding their inquiry. They're not just looking at the summit incident. They're investigating your last 3 funding rounds, and they've already granted immunity to your former CFO." Richard's mouth went dry. "That's impossible." "Not anymore," the lawyer said. "He's been cooperating for weeks." For the first time, the mask cracked. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he poured himself a drink. "I built this company." "They wouldn't dare." "They would," the lawyer interrupted. "And they are." The next morning, Langford Systems issued a brief public statement. The company is reviewing allegations internally and cooperating fully with federal investigators. But behind the scenes, panic reigned. 3 major clients suspended all contracts. Investors withdrew millions. Market analysts downgraded the company to sell. At Novatech, Maya's day began with another report from Ethan. "Langford's board is meeting privately this afternoon. They're not inviting him," she nodded slowly. "Then they're already choosing a side." Ethan hesitated. "Do you ever feel sorry for him?" She took a moment before answering. "I feel sorry for the people he hurt. I feel sorry for the culture he created. But him—" She paused, her voice steady. "No. He had every chance to be better." As she spoke, Richard faced his board across a long glass table. The atmosphere was cold and brittle. The chairwoman leaned forward, her tone sharp and deliberate. "Jeffrey, the SEC inquiry isn't a rumor. It's real. And the penalty clause you triggered is legally enforceable." Richard raised his voice. "No court will uphold that nonsense." "Our lawyers disagree," she replied. "They've reviewed the footage. You violated the terms beyond dispute." He pounded the table. "I'm the reason this company exists. Stand with me and we ride it out." Silence followed. No one looked at him. The only sound came from the distant click of a pen against paper. At that moment, across the city, Maya was in another meeting. This one far quieter, more strategic. Representatives from 3 of Langford's largest competitors sat across from her. "We want to align with your ethics framework," one executive said. "You've turned this chaos into leadership, and the market notices." Maya listened carefully. "We'll collaborate," she said, "but only with those who respect the standards we live by." "No exceptions," they agreed without hesitation. Within hours, Novatech's partnership announcements hit the news. Deals worth over $11 billion combined. Investors who had doubted her now called her a visionary. As the markets closed that day, Novatech reached its highest valuation in history. And in a quiet office miles away, Richard Langford stared at a headline that captured everything he'd lost. "Novatech rises. Langford falls. Ethics win the market." He laughed once, a broken sound. "She planned this," he whispered. From the start, he wasn't wrong. Rain poured against the glass walls of Richard Langford's office that evening, a steady rhythm like a countdown he couldn't silence. He stood alone, staring at the city lights below, the same skyline he used to believe he owned. His reflection in the window looked smaller now, thinner, older. Behind him, his lawyer's voice broke the stillness. "They're not waiting for you anymore. The board has decided to move forward without your approval." Richard turned slowly, his voice hoarse. "Move forward with what?" "Leadership transition," the lawyer said quietly. "They're convening a vote tomorrow morning. The words hit harder than he expected. "You mean to fire me?" The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't have to. Richard walked to his desk and placed both hands flat on the cold surface. "Everything I built, every idea, every sleepless night." He looked up sharply. "They can't erase me." The lawyer closed his briefcase. "They don't have to erase you, Richard. You did that yourself." Across the city, the Novatech building glowed against the storm-dark sky. Inside, Maya worked long after everyone had gone home. Her office was quiet except for the hum of her computer and the faint buzz of rain outside. She reviewed the final reports from her compliance team, a mountain of data documenting years of misconduct at Langford Systems. Her assistant knocked softly. "You should rest. After this," Maya said. Her eyes scanned one last document, a spreadsheet detailing whistleblower testimonies. It was no longer just about Richard. His downfall had opened something much larger, something that reached deep into the entire industry. An idea formed in her mind, sharp and clear. If the problem is systemic, she said to herself, the solution must be too. The next morning, Novatech announced an initiative unlike anything the tech sector had seen. It was a framework of enforceable ethics, zero tolerance for harassment, mandatory equity-linked compensation for executives, and transparent reporting structures. They called it the Carter Standards. Reporters immediately drew comparisons. "This could reshape corporate culture," one anchor said. "She's turned a scandal into a blueprint for accountability." Maya ignored the noise. For her, this wasn't about publicity. It was about permanence. Meanwhile, Richard entered his boardroom for what would be his final meeting. The air was thick with unease. His executives avoided his gaze. The chairwoman called the session to order with a tone colder than the rain outside. "Mr. Langford," she began, "the SEC's findings are serious. Coupled with the public evidence of your behavior, we have no viable path forward with you as CEO." "You can't be serious," he snapped. "I built this company, and now you've endangered it," she replied calmly. "The vote is not personal. It's survival." He glared around the room, waiting for someone to defend him. No one did. 8 votes to 1. His own. Security waited outside the door before he even stood up. His badge was deactivated before he reached the elevator. His car keycard stopped working before he hit the garage. The empire he once controlled down to the second now erased him faster than an email deletion. By the time he stepped onto the street, soaked and speechless, his phone buzzed with a notification. Langford Systems appoints interim CEO. Company pledges cultural reform. He threw the phone into a nearby trash bin. At Novatech headquarters, Maya's phone rang. Her assistant answered, listened briefly, then looked up. "It's him," Maya hesitated. "Put him through." Richard's voice came through the line, low but tight with restraint. "Congratulations," he said. "You won." "This wasn't a contest," she replied. "Of course it was," he said bitterly. "Everything in this world is." "You're wrong," she said quietly. "It's not about winning. It's about accountability. Don't preach to me, Maya. You've taken everything. What more do you want?" "I want change," she answered. Not revenge. For a moment there was only silence. Then he laughed, not cruelly but hollow, like a man realizing how much he had misunderstood his own story. "You think this industry will change because of you?" he asked. "I think it already has," she said, and ended the call. That evening, her team watched as 3 more tech giants announced internal reviews, citing the Carter Standards as their model. Within a week, venture capital firms began revising their investment policies to include conduct clauses. Investors started using the phrase "pulling a Langford" to describe career implosions caused by misconduct. The markets had done what moral lectures couldn't. They had made decency profitable. At his home, Richard's world shrank. His calendar emptied, his friends stopped calling, and his publicist quit. He lived among unopened boxes and unanswered emails. The silence became unbearable. When his lawyer visited again, the conversation was brief. "The SEC has expanded the investigation," the lawyer said. "They've found offshore accounts and tax discrepancies. If you cooperate, there's a chance to avoid criminal charges." Richard sat heavily in a chair. "And if I don't?" "Then you'll go down in court instead of in headlines." For a long time, Richard said nothing. Then he sighed. "Tell them I'll talk." The following week, Langford Systems announced a settlement totaling nearly $5 billion in losses once penalties, lawsuits, and reputation costs were included. Analysts called it the most expensive case of arrogance in modern corporate history. Maya didn't celebrate. She just watched the numbers scroll across the screen and whispered, "That's the cost of silence." Her assistant entered with a new report. "Another company just adopted the Carter standards," she said. "That makes 12, Maya smiled faintly. 12 down. Thousands to go. Later that night, as the city lights shimmered across the glass, she received a message she didn't expect. It came from an encrypted address with no name attached. It read, "I need to meet." No lawyers, no press, just a conversation. Maya stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed one word back, "When?" They met a week later in a quiet cafe on the edge of the harbor. No bodyguards, no assistants, no cameras. Just two people sitting across from each other as the morning light reflected off the water outside. Richard arrived first. He looked smaller than the man she remembered. The sharp suits were gone, replaced by a plain jacket and weary eyes. When Maya entered, he stood up awkwardly, unsure whether to offer his hand. She nodded once, a gesture that allowed him to sit. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice subdued. "I wasn't sure I would," she replied, "but curiosity got the better of me." He smiled faintly. "Curiosity. That's a better start than anger." Maya didn't smile back. "Why am I here, Richard?" He hesitated. "Because I owe you something. An explanation, maybe. Or closure." She waited. He stared down at his coffee, the steam rising between them. "You were right," he said finally. "About everything. I thought power made me untouchable. I thought control meant respect. But it didn't, it just made me blind." For the first time, there was no edge in his tone, no defense, just weariness. "I've spent months in therapy," he continued. "At first, I thought it was damage control, but then I started seeing what I refused to see before. The patterns. The arrogance. The fear of losing control. It wasn't strength. It was insecurity in disguise." Maya studied him quietly. The man across from her wasn't the tyrant she faced at the summit. He looked human now. Flawed. Tired. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quickly, noticing her silence. "I know better than that. But I'm trying to build something. Different. A program for executives like me. People who've lost their way, who need to unlearn the power games before they destroy everything around them." "You think anyone would trust you to lead that?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "Probably not. But I can help design it. Maybe that's worth something." Maya looked out the window at the slow movement of the harbor. The world outside kept turning, indifferent to the conversation. "Redemption isn't earned in words," she said softly. "It's earned in consistency." "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't want press or attention. I'm done pretending," she turned back to him. "And what do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said simply, "just to know if you think it's even possible for people like me to change." Maya thought for a moment. "Change isn't about erasing who you were. It's about becoming accountable for what you did. That's not a transformation. It's a process that never ends." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe I'll start there." They sat in silence for a while. No hostility, no triumph. Just two people who had lived through the same storm, each scarred differently. When they finally stood, he said, "I meant what I said once, long ago. You were more capable than I ever was. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Maya nodded once. "Then start showing courage now." He watched her leave, the sound of her heels fading as the cafe door closed behind her. For a long time he stayed seated, staring at the cup she left behind. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere inside him, something else did too. In the months that followed, Richard disappeared from public life entirely. He sold his properties, closed his consulting firm, and quietly joined an ethics research foundation under a pseudonym. The news barely noticed. At Novatech, Maya's work continued. The Carter standards had transformed from a corporate policy into a global movement. Over 30 companies across multiple continents had adopted them, integrating ethical leadership into their core practices. Investors began including Carter compliance as a factor in their evaluations. The phrase had entered business vocabulary. One afternoon, her assistant entered her office with a message marked urgent. "It's from the Equity Foundation," she said. "They want you to speak at the Global Summit next quarter." "The topic's ethics is innovation," Maya smiled. "Tell them yes." When the day of the summit came, the hall was filled with new faces, younger leaders, more diverse, more aware. Maya walked to the stage with the same calm confidence she had once carried into the tech forum years earlier. Her speech was simple. Power without accountability becomes corruption. Success without ethics becomes hollow. Real leadership isn't about control. It's about creating spaces where others can lead too. The applause rose slowly, building like a wave. She didn't linger in it. She just stepped away from the podium, leaving her words to do their work. Back in her office days later, she received an anonymous email. It contained a single line. The program has started. First session complete. Thank you for the push, no name. But she knew. She closed the laptop and allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. The world was far from perfect, but it was moving. Not because one person demanded justice, but because one person refused to accept anything less. The next year brought even bigger changes. Tech conferences adopted new codes of conduct modeled after her standards. Venture capital firms built integrity clauses into funding agreements. Business schools began teaching the Carter framework as part of their core leadership courses. The industry wasn't healed, but it was evolving. The phrase "doing a Langford" now meant accountability, not scandal. It had become shorthand for public reckoning, followed by reform. Late one evening, Maya returned to her apartment overlooking the city. She made tea, set her tablet aside, and stood by the window. The skyline shimmered like circuitry, alive with energy and change. Somewhere out there, new leaders were being shaped. Some by her example, others by his mistakes. She smiled to herself, a small, knowing smile. The storm had been worth it. She whispered softly into the quiet room. The future doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who listen, learn, and lead with conscience. Outside, the lights of Novatech's tower glowed brighter than ever, and for the first time in years, Maya Carter felt peace. Months later, spring returned to the city like an exhale. The harsh winds had softened and sunlight poured through Novatech's glass towers. The world had changed since that infamous summit. Companies that once dismissed ethics as public relations now treated it like oxygen. Investors had started valuing transparency as much as profit. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the window of her corner office. She didn't see triumph. She saw evolution. Growth born from conflict, progress carved from courage. Her assistant entered quietly. "Congress confirmed the date for your testimony," she said. "Next week in Washington," Maya nodded. "Good. It's time we take this conversation beyond boardrooms." When the day came, the hearing room overflowed. Lawmakers, reporters, and industry leaders filled every seat. Cameras blinked like watchful eyes. Maya walked to the witness table with her usual calm, but her presence carried a new kind of gravity. She wasn't there as a victim or a reformer. She was there as the architect of a movement. One senator leaned forward. "Ms. Carter, what's the core issue in your view?" She spoke evenly, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "The issue isn't that we lack laws. It's that we lack accountability. When misconduct becomes profitable, it thrives. When it becomes expensive, it dies." The statement echoed across the room. Another senator asked, "So how do we enforce accountability?" Maya looked around the chamber, meeting each face without flinching. "By linking ethics to economics. Make leadership behavior measurable. Make cultural health part of valuation. When integrity becomes an asset, markets will protect it." For a long moment, there was silence. Then applause. Soft at first, then stronger until the committee chair had to call the room to order. News of her testimony spread worldwide within hours. Editorials called it a defining moment for the modern economy. Universities began updating curricula. Even skeptical politicians cited her words in future policy debates. Back at Novatech, the company continued to rise, but it wasn't just about profit anymore. It had become a symbol, proof that power guided by conscience could outperform greed guided by ego. Maya walked through the research wing one afternoon, greeting young engineers who were building technologies once deemed impossible. Their neural interface projects were entering clinical trials, offering new hope to patients whose conditions had no cures. The same innovation Richard once mocked as a science project now stood on the threshold of saving lives. That evening, as she prepared to leave, her assistant handed her a newspaper. "You'll want to see this," she said. The headline read, Former CEO Richard Langford partners with Ethics Foundation to launch Leadership Rehabilitation Initiative. Below it was a small photo. Richard, thinner, humbler, speaking to a room of executives. The caption quoted him directly. "Change isn't weakness. It's the courage to face the truth before the truth faces you." Maya read the article twice quietly. No gloating, no bitterness. Just a calm acceptance that even the people who once embodied the problem could become part of the solution. That night, she went for a walk along the river. The water shimmered beneath the city lights, reflecting a skyline that had learned something from its own reflection. As she passed the cafe where they'd met months ago, she paused by the window. The table was empty now, but the memory lingered, a conversation that had turned an ending into a beginning. The following week, Novatech hosted the first annual Ethical Innovation Forum, a gathering of leaders, engineers, and investors from around the world. Maya stood on stage looking out over a sea of faces, not just executives but students, researchers, creators, and activists. The very people who would inherit the systems she had helped reshape. She began simply. A year ago, this industry faced a mirror and didn't like what it saw. But we didn't turn away. We looked harder. We changed. And we're still changing. She told the crowd that accountability wasn't punishment, it was evolution. That ethics wasn't an obstacle to innovation, it was its foundation. She reminded them that progress meant nothing without principle. Her final words carried through the silence like a promise. The measure of power isn't how many follow your lead. It's how many rise because you made space for them to lead too. The applause rose like thunder. That night, as she looked out over the glittering city from Novatech's terrace, Maya allowed herself a long breath. The skyline stretched far into the distance and alive, redefined, and still growing. The air smelled of rain, renewal, and something else. Hope. Somewhere out there, other leaders were rewriting their own stories, guided by the ripple she had set in motion. Somewhere, a young woman watched the summit video for the first time and saw not humiliation but defiance and possibility. Maya turned toward the horizon. For the first time, she didn't see a battlefield. She saw balance. And as the night deepened, she whispered to herself the truth she had always known but only now fully understood. Real power isn't about winning. It's about building something that lasts when you're gone. The wind shifted, carrying her words into the quiet hum of the city. A city forever changed by one woman's refusal to accept silence as the price of success. The story had begun with a hand refused. It ended with a world transformed,